Well, both girls and boys who are in the juvenile justice system have terrible histories of physical, not only neglect, but physical abuse in their families. But the boys could escape. They could go to the streets. Unfortunately, when they go to the streets, they're often victimized by other boys. So if you look at the backgrounds of boys in gangs, for example, you see not only were they hurt and their families, when they escape to the streets, they get involved in gangs and they get involved in further boy on boy violence, but it's in the community. With girls, because of gendered expectations on the part of parents, parents have a different view of girls leaving versus not leaving, and they want their daughters to stay around. And so the physical victimization continues and is more serious. The family victimization is more serious in their lives. And there's another aspect to it, and that is that there's often a sexual component, meaning that there's some person in the family, maybe it's grandpa, maybe it's an uncle, maybe it's even a brother, who is victimizing this young woman sexually. So there's a sexual component to the victimization. So it's both familial and sexual victimization. If they do escape to the streets, that victimization can continue on the streets. In that, if you look at the backgrounds of girls in gangs, often they're sexually assaulted by members of the gang. Sometimes it's even, bundled up, and they say, well, this is an initiation right that we have to, all the boys, you have to have sex with all the boys in the gang. But of course it's sexual assault, and it's a terrible way that girls continue to be victimized, often when they're just trying to escape from family violence. So it's a sad story. Any really good ethnography, and I'm thinking about the stuff that, John Hagedorn and we collected some ethnographies of good research that was done by people like Joan Moore and others looking at what was going on in the gangs. I knew that the issue of victimization was critical, in part because when I was teaching in a prison here in the islands, I had female students, and it was actually a woman inmate who told me, I was teaching marriage and the family, and she wanted to look at incest, and she wanted to look at sexual victimization of girls. And I said, Michelle, why do you want to do that? And she said, because a lot of the ladies here have that background. So I learned that actually from a woman who had run away. Her victimization started when she was 6 years old. By the time she was 13, she was running away from home, and that was how she ultimately got involved in prostitution, and she was in prison for a drug offense. So that Michelle's life kind of opened the door for me to see how the victimization of girls was linked to the lives of women in prison, because, they had to, and she engaged in prostitution to support herself while she was on the streets. And not every girl has that trajectory, but many do. So that was another, way that I got into thinking about victimization and women's offending. Boys, again, there's not necessarily a sexual component, unless we're talking, and we need to think more about this, the situation of trans youth and the situation of gay and lesbian youth, because they're also often at odds with their parents and often on the streets because they've been thrown out of their homes in some instances. So the juvenile justice system also has to focus on, what do you do with trans youth? And particularly, where do you house a transgender youth? Do you house them with the gender identity that they've adopted, or do you say, no, it matters, if we pull your pants down, what we see? And those are all important issues that have to be wrestled with. But when we talk about traditional male delinquency and the victimization, it leaves the lives of boys earlier than it leaves girls and women. And they're more victimizers than they are continuing to be victims. Does that make sense? So that's how gender and victimization sort of shakes out.